Welcome to Charts This Week. My name is David Linton. I run Updata, and this week's edition for Monday, the 1st of February, comes to you from Houston, Texas, the heart of the oil business. And first of all, we start by looking at crude. And we have seen this recovery, and you'll remember that over the last couple of weeks we've been saying that this was the time of year that we would expect crude to recover. So this does look like a bottom for a while here now. Correlation with the US dollar becoming neutral at the moment, so currency having little or no impact. All the data is coming from Thomson Reuters Icon, of course. The great thing with Updata is it will run on your Icon, your Bloomberg, DTN, a whole host of data feeds. But here this morning I'm running on Icon and real-time OTC broker data, which you could also get from your Trayport screen. So the ability to bring this data together is really powerful. So we start here by saying that we are well still below the clouds. So we still have a bear trend. We need to get into the mid 40s, really the high 40s, for this medium-term bear trend, which started in the summer, and this is when we were very bearish on oil, but now we are recovering. But we need to get back into the high mid 40s, which is a long way away, before we would be bullish on oil again. If we look at the seasonality, this is why we've been calling this this move off the bottom. We get a strong few months now. Don't be surprised to see oil making new lows later in the year, but for now it looks like we're trading off the bottom. So this is likely a counter trend move for the next few months. If we look at the 60-minute chart, that's really showing up here. We see how we crossed the cloud on the 21st of January. Now we're in this uptrend above the cloud. We'd only be bearish now below about $33 on Brent. So we've got about a $2 cushion there at the moment. Shift T on your Updata system gives you the trends and targets. Upside targets pointing to 3680. There's two of them. That's what we call a cluster. Increases the likelihood. A little downside target that is also activated, but we are starting to break the trend here, so that's quite key. So oil starting to look stronger, and as we said, we've been saying that for a couple of weeks now, that oil probably should trade stronger. This is from we were extremely bearish on crude, and that's what the message people remember. But that's the whole point of watching charts this week, is that the position does change. Shift T on the WTI chart. We do have a little bit clearer downside target to $30.70 here. That's 5% downside. There are the upside targets here in place, but doesn't quite look as good on WTI as it does on Brent. So that's quite key. If we take a look at the spread is now just changing a little bit. It has been very close to zero. Just changing, pulling back into territory that we've seen more recently. Spread is just giving a little bit of sell-off. This is the WTI, Brent WTI spread from your Reuters terminal. There's the code. Of course, with Updata, you just type in the same code as you was on Thomson Reuters Icon. And it will give you the charts. So here we see US NatGas. Here we're below the cloud on the weekly, below on the daily, and here we see on the daily as well that we just really are stuck in this 250 range this year. Here's the 60-minute chart for Henry Hub. A lot of range last week, but just started to trend towards the end of the week, pulling back sharply this morning. It's coming right back to sort of from the 230 level back to 218. Shift T will give you the medium-term targets. If we can get back above this 232 target, we've got a target all the way to 271. So that's on the 60-minute chart. But if you're trading WTI, then you want to look at the 1-minute candles. And here we see the 1-minute chart. Shift T on your system. Oh, and we do have this downside target of 192. So does, at the moment, in the very short term, look like we're going lower. That's quite a big thrust sell-off there that we're seeing. So really quite key that. If we might take a move and look at European gas, now this data is coming off the Updata Energy feed, real-time consolidated broker into your Updata system, or you can get this data from your Trayport screen if you've got Trayport. Most traders trading power and gas in Europe on Trayport use Updata for their charting. Here we see this is MBP front month, recovered a little bit in the last few days, but still in a very bearish trend. We need to get back above 37 pence here, and in fact probably near 41 on the lagging line. So a lot of work to do at the moment to get a long-term recovery or medium term. The 60-minute chart did turn bullish on the on the cloud, but we are just pulling back down below the cloud again. So again, that is looking bearish again. This is the classic downtrend behavior. Counter very sideways moves or short counter trend moves, big moves down. Small counter trend moves, big moves down. So we shouldn't be surprised to see that. Shift T on your system will give you the trends and targets, and they're all down. So there's further to go on gas yet. 28.85 was nearly met, given back at 32.50. I've now got targets to 28.15 and 26.50. So downside still playing there. Of course, if you're trading MBP, either on your TradeBot screen or from the Updata energy feed, Shift T will give you the downside targets. This is the 1 minute chart. These are the very short-term targets to look for today or the next day. And here we see 27.50 again is there as a downside target. TTF, we see here we're bearish below the cloud here on the 60-minute chart. Just did recover a little bit again above the cloud like MBP, but just coming back below again. Shift T, and it's all downside targets again. So no upside thrust targets here. So that's the really key thing. 12.10 is the next downside target. So still going lower. NCG and NordPool, their recoveries are still showing in train here on the 60-minute chart, but almost certainly will follow NBP and TTF in terms of their picture. German power looking bearish again this morning. Another couple of percent move down, back to testing these lows. Here we see on the 60-minute, we'd have to get all the way above, by the way, 27.50 on German power. We're at 22.95. That's like a 20% upside before we would turn bullish on German power. If we take a look at the 60-minute chart, here's exactly the downtrend movement you expect to see. Sideways move, big move down. Sideways move, big move down, sideways move. Remember, these sideways moves look quite bigger at the time, but as the scale changes, and now we've got to test this 22.75 level, that looks almost certain to break. Shift T on your Updata system, hold the Shift key and press T. Does give you the trends and targets. Interestingly, we do have a counter trend upside target, 10% upside, 9.6% upside, and no significant downside targets. So that does just limit our thinking a little bit, because the 1 minute chart, if you're trading German power, this is the chart to look at. And if we're just on the teetering on the edge of activating a downside target to 21.75, 22.40 already activated. So it does look like new lows on German power are inevitable. Remember, this is at a time when crude is actually recovering, so it's interesting that these markets are still going on. UK power still looking bearish. Nordic power trying on the yearly and on the quarterly to get above the cloud. If we just take a look at the targets for the quarterly contract, pretty much in a range here, and we do have upside and downside targets. This new downside target, the green crosses of this morning's crosses, activated 4.6% downside. So not looking great for the power markets in Europe. If we take a look at the dollar index, this is the really key thing to keep an eye on. We break this level of about 100.5, and that is the beginning potentially of a new strong run in the dollar. We wrote a report on this last month, the month before last, on the euro and the dollar. So really quite key here. Will we break above this level? And that's the long-term chart on the dollar. If we take a look at the 60-minute chart, this is where you get the heads up. Will we break 105.5? Shift T. We do have these very strong targets to 103.5 and 104.2. We also have a downside target to 92.30, so could go either way, but the trend is up. Lots of minions targets up. Don't be surprised to see the dollar breaking out to the upside, making new highs on the dollar index. And then, of course, that has implications for commodities. Strong dollar, although we did see that correlation at the moment, is pretty neutral. Here we see the euro dollar. This is the daily chart. We're still bearish on the euro, below the cloud. 60-minute chart, we're still below, although we have recovered quite strongly this morning. Shift T for a heads up on the targets. No real clear targets. This one here, 118, has been activated, but obviously we'd want to see a move out of this consolidation phase. Probably at about a 111, and then we'd maybe look to that target being more realistic. And then, of course, if you're trading Forex or you're watching it closely, the 1 minute chart, data coming from Thomson Reuters icon, just adjust the box size down here, and we see here how much we are in the range. 136% downside, 107.20, but we're just starting to break through here. But no clear direction at the moment is what this chart tells us. If we take a look at other currencies, first of all, look at sterling. Sterling's had a terrible run this year. Recovery. But here we see we're below the cloud. We've got to get all the way back above the 151 level before we'd be bullish on sterling in the medium term. If we look at the 60-minute chart, we're below here, pretty range bound. We did just test this low as a 140, 150 level on Friday, and here we see we're just still below the cloud. Shift T will give us some clues on direction. If we make new lows, we've got a downside target of 137.70. So we do have some counter trend moves, and this one just activated 144.60, but we do have this downside target hanging over us. And of course, the 1 minute charts will give you a heads up there as well. If we look at euro sterling, this has gone back into a range, having euro having climbed against sterling. We see we're in this mid 70s range. Norwegian kroner has fallen away a bit here, the euro, so kroner has strengthened, and here we see the Swiss franc 111, so this has really broken out. And against sterling in the mid 140s, so this range now between 143 and 155, quite a big range there. So if we take a look at stocks, we start with the S&P 500. Stronger week last week, that's showing up on this weekly candle, but we are bearish whilst we stay below the cloud. The S&P needs to get back above 2,000, basically, 2,005 points, before we would turn bullish again on the market. And basically it needs to hold that level for a few weeks now that we're below for a few weeks. So we've got to get back into that territory. Is this a buying opportunity or the start of something of a bear market? We wrote a report out to clients about that last week, a very detailed report, and that's the key. At the moment we are worried while we're below the cloud. Daily as well, we have to get back above the 2,075, let's say 2,100 level to be bullish on the daily, and we have just turned bullish on the 60-minute at the end of last week. So we are seeing some strength coming back into the market. Downside target of 23% activated, which is a bit scary, but lots of support here around 10%. If we move below the lows we saw, then this target here gets activated as well. That's on the 0.5% chart, and we do have some upside targets here at the moment, around 3% upside potential there. If we take a look at the NASDAQ has been the leading indicator all the way through this, and the NASDAQ weekly chart hasn't fallen below the cloud, so maybe tech will save us. We see here on the daily though, got work to do, and we are through on the 60-minute, and some upside targets around 2%, so nothing terribly exciting, no big thrusts off these lows, which is a little bit disconcerting. We take a look at the FTSE this morning. FTSE is down about 1.2%. Here we see very bearish on the weekly, below the cloud. That's because it's, of course, oil and gas laden, oil and minerals laden, mining stocks. Below on the daily, we have moved above on the 60-minute chart, and we have just started to give some upside potential here. About 2% upside. This target here is 6% not yet activated. Downside targets all the way. FTSE looking quite bearish in the medium and long term. If we look at the DAX is also down about 1.2%. Right on support at the moment. So this is the first market really to test these support levels. We do have downside targets on the 0.5%, and very mixed picture on the 60-minute chart. Still just holding the bullishness here on the lagging line on the weekly, below on the daily, and above on the 60-minute chart. So quite a mixed picture. If we take a look at Asia, we'll start with China. This is the market, of course, that's caused all the turmoil. Here we see we're still holding unbelievably on the weekly. So provided we don't go much lower, then we might still be in long-term. Remember, this is very long-term bull territory. The weekly falling off a cliff below the cloud. The 60-minute chart, this is where we'll see any sign of a turnaround that would help us on the weekly. The 60-minute chart is bearish. We do have this downside target here. This is quite scary, this downside target. This downside target, 40% downside on the Chinese market activated. So it really does suggest something scary could happen in China. So this is unnerving a lot of technicians when they see these downside pressure. If we take a look at the Nikkei, Nikkei had a strong recovery this morning, 1.2% up, and holding the weekly quite strongly. Daily still below the cloud, 60-minute above. Downside targets here, 25% downside, but above the trend here. China's broken its trend. So Nikkei holding up. And then if we take a look at the Sensex index, this was up 2% as well this morning. Just a little bit below on the weekly cloud, so a bit worrying there. And downside targets. A lot of markets have got 20% downside targets. And then if we take a look at the S&P Australian market, here we see below on the weekly, below on the daily, recovering slightly and about 2% upside. So the picture on most markets is that we've got 2% upside potential in the very short term. That's in the short term chart. That's on the 60-minute charts where we're thinking days ahead. On the weekly charts, a lot of markets now have given long-term sell signals. So that's where we're thinking months ahead. A tough year potentially for markets whilst that picture ensues, and then the short term we've got some upside potential. So it looks like this could just be a counter trend move. This week will be very, very important and critical, so keep watching your charts. Until next week, happy charting, see you then.